First of all, hello. Hello, everyone. Bonjour. Do we have any Francophone folks? Bonjour. Buenos dias. No. Bom dia. No Portuguese. Okay. All right. So we're going with French and English in the room today. Welcome, everybody. I'm Shakira McIntosh, Director with Global Health Strategies. Very happy to welcome you all here for this discussion on women-led development, empowering communities, and beyond. First and foremost, I want to say that I'm very happy to be moderating this panel. We're really looking forward to this discussion. And in the spirit, I think, of the Cape Town conversation, we really would like this to be a conversation. I love this roundtable model. And actually, I'm wondering if I could just ask folks at the back to come up a bit closer so that we're a bit closer in, if you don't mind, if you could just fill up these seats at the front. Is that okay? That way we're just a bit more huddled in and we can really chat. That would be really great. No, you'd like to stay like that, that's fine. So really, I really want to make this a conversation. I want to give a bit of background and framing from our perspective at Global Health Strategies, and then I'm going to turn the floor over to our panelists for a few questions, and then close out the session with really questions from yourselves so that we can all talk about some of these concrete actions or experiences from your various countries as far as women-led development is concerned. So, I mean, as a communications and advocacy agency, we at GHS have been working alongside many of our clients and partners over the past couple of years, really trying to move the needle on gender equality within our means, obviously. And it's a broad topic, right? So for us, the question has always been, where do we start? And we tend to focus on two main areas. We look specifically at getting high-level support to drive efforts towards women's economic power. And then we always also try to focus on amplifying women's leadership, particularly in areas that are so important for the continent now more than ever, such as climate action, financing for development, for example. How do we make sure that we raise women's voices on these key issues for us? The way we've been asking a lot of questions as well on what are the pathways that you take to concrete change. We've talked a lot in the plenary sessions about the solutions. We hear a lot of folks offering up solutions, but what are the pathways to actually making those solutions a reality for women on the ground? So those are one of the big questions that we've asked. So what I really hope for this panel is that we can dive more deeply into that and look at some of these concrete areas of action, and our panelists are going to share a few. I'm really honored that we have such a distinguished panel to think with us today, and I'd love to introduce them to you. So I'll start with Bandana Priyashi. Welcome, Bandana. Bandana is Secretary, Environment, Forest, Climate Change from the Indian Administrative Service. We've also got with us Christelle Safak. Christelle is an economist by training and the Chief Social Policy for UNICEF, currently based in Madagascar. Welcome, Christelle. We've also got Shomo Bomik with us. Shomo is an Associate Fellow from the Observer Research Foundation. Welcome, Shomo. And last but not least, we've got Ornella Chuchi with us, who is the Group Deputy Chairwoman for ICAR Holdings and a former board member of the Global Environment Facilities and the Green Climate Fund. Welcome. Great. So I'm going to jump right in because I'd love to leave a lot of time for us to talk together at the end of the question period. I'm going to start with Shomo. Shomo is also an economist. And Shomo, I really would love for you to set the context a bit for us, the framing. We've had a lot of conversations. Often when we talk about women-led development, gender equality, it's always framed within this moral framework. This is something that we should do because it's morally right. But I'd love, Shomo, for you to also share with us the economic case for women-led development, why it makes economic sense. from your work as a researcher and from your experience as an economist.
Yeah. Am I audible? Yeah. Thanks, Shakira, for the wonderful introduction, and a very good morning to everyone. Also, I want to especially thank you for letting me speak first, being the only man in a women's panel. And it's also, something that I want to point out, that whenever it's research on women or gender, it's always a majority of women, as if men are supposed to be out of the system, externally taking notes on what to be done. For example, see, when we talk about climate, we don't talk about climate change as a man's issue or a woman's issue. Similarly, we need to move to a point where we don't talk about gender as a women's issue, or it is also a man's issue. So yeah, I'll just dive in straight into the economic case for women-led development, which will substantiate the first point that I make, where how women-led development is important for anyone and everyone. So I'll start with a small anecdote from my field visits in Gujarat and Madhya Pradesh, where I met a lot of women who had said that they are currently they are able to save a lot of time in fetching water, which would earlier take them 2 hours to fetch. But now, because of the intervention, they could save like a couple of hours in the day, which they are now able to use for skilling and for their leisure time and other stuff. So what I want to focus here upon is the opportunity cost of time. So it's not only, which is, one of the most enablers. So when we talk about skilling or networks or tech, the complementary input is always the time. If you don't have the time for that, how do you even leverage these things? So the opportunity cost of time is very important, not only for rural women, but for the urban case, it also tends to be the opportunity to work because of the time savings. So which definitely has an impact on the regional as well as the domestic economy. Moving on, also one more point that I want to highlight is women's propensity to save. So in economics, we have savings propensity as well as consumption propensity. In the rural case, we have seen a lot of women whose savings are much higher than men, and statistically speaking. And the most interesting part is that this savings get converted into productive investment, while men's savings does not really get converted into productive investments. I'm not getting into the cultural reasons why, but as per data, you will see a lot of rural savings by women moving into, say, handicrafts, or say moving into making them entrepreneurs. So that's what I mean by savings propensity of women being productive and being mobilized in the economy per se. Also, the topic is on, it's grassroots women. There has been a lot of studies where we know, even in terms of women's representation, be it across companies at electoral levels, grassroots women's representation and participation in the processes always have a bigger impact because, unfortunately, for a lot of global south countries, there is this issue of tokenism at the higher levels. So the more we push the grassroots level women as not as token representatives, but to be more participatory in the process, will always bear more stronger impact. Finally, I just want to conclude by saying that when we are talking about women-led development or women's financial inclusion, in essence, we are talking about their participation in the economic processes. We are talking about a very diversified human capital base. A diversified human capital base with different kinds of skills, which is accessible only at the grassroots level, always has a greater potential for productivity than a case where that is not. I did not want to touch upon the moral case of women empowerment or women-led development, which I'm sure the other panelists will talk about. It is time that we look at women-led development beyond a moral case and look at it as an economic case, which affects you, me, and everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shomo. No, I think that's really spot on. And what I'm hearing is time is precious. Women's time is precious. And the idea there is to really make sure that we create those opportunities where women's time can be as productive as possible. And that will have the knock-on effect on the economy for all of us. Christelle, I'm going to come to you because I think that framing is helpful. The next step is how do you create that enabling environment where those opportunities are available for women, where they can take advantage of them, where they can step into their power, so to speak, and really sort of lead. In your work at UNICEF and in your experience as well as an economist, how do you go about creating that enabling environment?
Thank you so much, Shakira. And then I'm really happy that you had this introduction by Shomo, because now I want to take maybe a couple of concrete examples from my experience. And then I'm talking about the case of Madagascar, not very far from here, very poor country. And then looking at really participation of women to the economic life, and also really to social life. You look at a couple of barriers that limit their access to this life. And then how to really increase your access and how to make your access more meaningful. It's about really trying to remove the barrier and trying to create an enabling environment. And one way of doing it is really about social protection, but not just social protection, gender blind. It's a gender transformative, because at the beginning, social protection was at looking at poor and really try to address the host causes of poverty. But by doing so, without looking at what are the differences between men and women and what are their differences in access, but the root causes, we don't really address the problem. So gender transformative will go and look at the root causes limiting women's access to capital, women's access to economic life. One aspect that is very important is education. It's education, because Madagascar, for example, I have a couple of other countries, but I really want to talk to Madagascar because it's the most recent example I have. It's also one of the poorest countries of the world. So enrollment rate at primary level is less than 50% of children. But then when moving from primary to secondary, there is a huge dropout rate. And then you find that only a third of age school children are in secondary. But among those third, less than a third again are girls. So really there is an important problem to address here if you want girls to be in the future participating to the labor force and to really have meaningful participation. So one way of doing that is really to have social protection program that will go at looking in households, poorest household, but really looking at households where girls don't go to school and give them cash. But people may be wondering, like, why just giving cash? What will be the impact? Because people give cash, they consume, and then there is no impact. But no, we have had studies to look at it, because by giving cash, you really are trying to reduce at-risk coping mechanism that families have. Families send girls to school, early in marriage. This is why you don't find girls in secondary school. By giving this cash to family, you are providing them with enough cash for them to keep their kids at home, to keep the girls at school. They don't have to send their girls to marriage early enough. By giving also this cash to girls, you are also keeping the girls at school, and then they are actually going to be able to acquire those skills that they are lacking when they join the job market. And then something that is also important is that you give cash, and then you give cash through mobile money. So you are also really promoting a financial inclusion that initially they don't have. And then something also that is a root cause for gender inequality is that women are not perceived as people that contribute or that have economic power. And then cash is given to mothers in the household. So this also changed the dynamics in terms of perceiving women as people who can contribute. And as Sumo put it, now that women have money, it's not only that it keeps girls at school, it's not only that it increases cash in the household, but also these women that receive cash are also going to translate it into productive assets. Something also that is really important is reducing barrier to women's access to job market in terms of maternity. So You give cash to girls, to women who have, to families that have girls to school, but also just to pregnant women with no counterpart, with no conditionality, meaning that at least they don't have really to stop all kind of economic activities, or they don't have to stop consuming because they are pregnant. Indeed, they have some kind of income. And then this is not only participation, but as I said, this is really change the dynamics within the community, because those women receiving cash are not only perceived like they are powerless, they are perceived because they have some kind of income, they are perceived as contributors. And then the girls also are becoming role models in their community, because girls, they are educated, they can talk, they can discuss. So this is really a kind of concrete example that I want to bring in the table in terms of gender-transformative social protection, because I know that social protection is a bit controversial in terms of just giving cash perceived as handouts. But if you frame social protection program such a way as it addresses the root causes of gender inequality, it actually has the potential to increase women's leadership in the community. Thank you. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Christelle. I think that's really interesting, the framing that you've given of gender transformative, because when I was listening to you, I really thought about generational shift, right? When you have a generation, if you can at least tackle this issue for a large number of girls, scale it up, then you're talking about a shift across generations where it's women who stay in school longer and get into the workforce and really change the game for their daughters when they eventually start having children. Thank you for that. I'm going to come to you now, Bandana. We've just heard from Christelle about some concrete examples that they've put in place and what how you address sort of the root causes. You've been working in the Indian Administrative Service for a very long time. What has been your experience of, taking some of these legislative processes? Because when I listened to Christelle, one of the questions I had is also, to what extent is the government engaged in this for the long-term sustainability, for example, of these programs? So, you've done a lot of legislative work around gender, and you have had to implement some of these programs at the community level. What has been your experience at that community level implementation, how you build that in-country ownership into it?
Thank you. Just a little background. I've been I'm a career civil servant for the last 20 years, and I've been part of both policy formulation and being part of the implementation. So when you talk about women-led development, I see it in two ways. One is, of course, putting women in a narrative of development and all the cross issues. When you're talking about development, you put women's challenges that women face on the forefront. But when we are also talking about women-led development, we are also talking about how do you put women in leadership roles? How do you put women in decision-making processes? Because my experience has been, when you're in the lower management, you see a lot of women, middle management also, a little less of women, but women nevertheless. But when you go to the top level of management, where you're the critical decision-making cutting edge, women, the number of women get less, and I've felt lonely there, being alone. Yeah. So the two aspects of women-led development. So, and now in a world which is now driven by fishers, I think there's one consensus which is around women development, empowerment, equality, and across all the multilaterals. We have spoken about a G20 we just had, where India came up with a very strong statement and a working group for women, and I think Brazil is going to take it forward. Africa 2063 talks about women and ending violence against women. SDGs talk about them, and including women in the decision-making process. So it is a given fact that, yes, this is something that has to be prioritized. But how do we prioritize? How do we make it possible from a larger, higher, and bring it down to the level of implementation? In my experience, I feel that there are three critical things. One would be the legislative framework or the laws, to put the strong laws in place. Second would be the robust policies that would be implemented by bureaucrats and civil servants at the ground level. Third would be give them adequate resources, whether it is human resource, whether it is financial resource, but give resources, because that would actually change. And finally, I think the context I come, a strong political will is also very, very important, which gives a lot of impetus to these policies. So coming to legislative processes, the legal framework is important because we are also fighting a lot of cultural and socioeconomic biases. For example, our country has, we have passed against child marriage, laws against child marriage, against female infanticide. We have passed against dowries, and also domestic violence, among others. So these are very, very strong laws, and very important implementation mechanisms are there in place. Plus, apart from that, we have affirmative laws also. For example, 26 weeks, 6 months of paid maternity leave, because this is an enabling thing. Then prevention of sexual harassment at workplace, that is another law, which is very, very strong, and it makes the environment safe. Compulsory creches, childcare facilities, if there are more than 10 women working. So these are the enabling laws which we have come up with. Then coming to the policy level, which we have been part of it, and we have many policies which are just directed at the grassroots, where women, very basic things like, for example, clean cooking gas, Ujjwala Yojana, Prime Minister's Ujjwala Yojana, clean cooking gas. It includes, it fights climate, time, what we spoke about, and also about dignity. We have Swachh Bharat, cleanliness mission, where we are providing clean sanitation, toilets for girls in schools. Our government at a federal level, they have started for providing sanitary napkins at the subsidized level, so that women are able to have a sanitation at their doorstep. We also talk about Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. That means save the girl child and educate them. So this is another policy where we have string of activities that happens. So, and we also talk about Jal Jeevan Haryali. That means getting clean water, access to clean water. So very basic. Health facilities, education that we spoke about, water, sanitation. These are the policies that we are being implemented at a very, very subsidized level under the leadership of our government. So when we are talking about, so I want to talk about one case that I have personally extremely proud of. And I'm carrying a coffee table book of that. I'll leave it here for anybody who wants to see it. This is called Jivika. Jivika means livelihood. So this is a project, and I was part of this journey for some time, so I'm immensely proud of it. So Jivika is India's biggest socio-economic forum for women. And it is started in Bihar in 2006. And it started in very small geographical area. And today it has an astounding success. So what is it? It's a self-help group. Women come together, and they come together and they started interloaning processes. So there are three structures. There's a self-help group. They combine into village organization, and they go to a federation level. And these women, they are women from extremely backward communities, marginal communities, and these women were brought in together with the help of a World Bank funding. And the hand-holding support that we got. And today, we have 1.3 million self-help groups, where there are 13 million participants, all women, and they have interloaning, which is a community investment fund, which we call. Among themselves, they had $1.3 billion, and they used this money to leverage to get $4.20 billion from financial institutions. And what are these women now? They are not only doing livelihood projects, but they have become a voice that we're talking about. They have become a voice for social protection. They have become a voice for bringing changes at the policy level. So this is the kind of replication that we can see in other countries. And this is something that is if you see them, you see their journey from what they were and how they became part of this dialogue, how they became part of this transformative process from being poor, marginalized, victims of domestic violence, no money, no education, and then coming to becoming leaders of their community, becoming the change makers. Because financial security, respect within the family, respect in the community. So this is something that I thought is immensely replicable in African context as well. And with this example, I would rest my case, and I would invite you to come over to Bihar. If you're traveling to India, you come and see for yourself what community-led development we have managed to achieve. These things take time, so it took some time, but we have arrived at a place where they are a voice which nobody can ignore now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bandana, for sharing that example. I'm hopeful that there'll be some questions about it in the follow-up session. Thanks a lot. Ornella, I'm going to come to you for the final question. And we're really going to touch on a topic that perhaps affects, well, it definitely affects women disproportionately, climate change, and even more so on our continent. Ornella, you are a former board member of the Global Climate Fund. And I'd love to just hear from you some of the strategies that you were able to champion when you were at GCF around women's leadership, women's representation, and what kind of impact that had for women, because I think it's important to hear that story.
Thank you. So thank you very much again. Good morning to all of you. But I will start for not agreeing with you first, because from the last research of the IPCC, climate change has woman face. And why? Because woman and girl continue to be the largely excluded from the rooms where decisions are made, firstly, for climate change, and secondly, women and girls from small islands and less developed countries, affected by conflict even, suffer when natural resources, food, water, come under threat. And the loss of these resources disproportional effect with the livelihood of this group. And the last research has shown us that women and children, they are 14 times more likely to men to die from the impact of climate change, like floods and fires. But let's go to the leadership, and let's go to the leaders on climate change. Women need a voice in this system because we cannot be what we cannot do not see. And GCF, I was very honored to represent the European Center, the Asian Center and the East European countries for 2 mandates on GCF. And so I'm talking about the GCF, a very good and very good planned institution, the biggest one found for climate change for all our countries. And while gender issues and gender mainstreaming, there was a precondition for a project to be financed, this was not reflected on the decision-making level as well, on the board, on the Green Climate Board. So just to mention that we were in total 6 women board members for donors and recipient countries, while which only 2 out of 12 board members from developing countries, and 4 more as alternate board members. So even though there is a clear policy in GCF to ensure gender equality, this was not for sure not the case for the board members themselves. And the problem was started from the countries. They were not nominating females for these positions. And so, based on my experience there, feeling very discriminated, feeling also without a voice. Nobody was hearing us. Nobody was giving us the permission to. We were not allowed even to speak sometimes there. Nobody was, and we were underrepresented on the groups and on the committees. So they were the men there. They were decided about themselves, being part of the communities of the every committee, and so we decided for the first time, and I took the initiative for creating the first informative in the beginning, woman leadership on climate change on the GCF. And we started to increase our voice and to increase and to be very focused on having the floor, firstly, and to support each other for having the floor, starting from this. And then we, in two board meetings, we increased our voice, and then we had the opportunity to take a statement. We are here, we created this group, and now we need to be respected as a group, not as members. And so 3 years later, now, I am very proud of this initiative because the board members in the GCF now, they are 50% women and 50% men. And for the first time in the GCF, in the history of GCF, we have a woman director, executive director of the GCF. And this was started from this point. So now the government, they are obliged from the GCF to have nominations on the basis, on the representation of women, and this was, let's say, the best opportunity to support each other and sharing my vision that great women are great women who support great women. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ornella. Thank you for this very concrete example of leadership and of, leaving a ladder there for other women to climb on, so that now, 3 years on, you can have the result that you have. I think, as you said, we can all agree that it's important that you're at the table and that women's voices are heard. So thank you for that example of leadership. You've all heard from our panelists. As I mentioned at the very beginning, I really wanted this to be a conversation and to also hear from you in the audience, your ideas on concrete actions, concrete pathways. We've seen from the panelists the importance of enabling environments, concrete examples such as cash transfers. But I'm opening the floor now to you for questions, comments. We'll take 3 at a time. When you get the mic, or you have mics, if you could just please state your name, the organization you're with, and to whom your question is directed. All right. So I'm just going to go 1, 2, 3. Yes? If you raise your hand very high so that I can... Yeah. Okay. So you had your hand up. If we start with you, 1, 2, 3, and then we'll go that way. Okay.
So I'm Ana Maria Poroschi from Romania, from the Ubuntu world. I am a founder. I'm working with foreign investment, but mostly in climate change, green energy, and circular economy. And I heard all your discussion, and I wanted to address the issue that actually is starting to have in Romania. We are the first country in the European Union with top executive leadership with women. The problem is that I'm also part of Empower Women. The problem is that women that are in top executive, the decision makers, cannot handle the childcare. So they come at home at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and they have kids, let's say 5 years up to 10 years old, and they cannot take care of their children. They can give to their mother to take care, but the emotional cannot help them. So we have this problem. A lot of women in top executive, they are divorced, more than 80%. And we're talking about big corporations. Me, I'm a founder since had 26 years old. So most of the women, we have like 35% in STEM because we are coming from a communist country. But during the Ceausescu, everything that was in mathematics, physics was the best. So Romania is like in IT, but also in this entrepreneurship. So we have this problem that I see in Romania with women that is, there are leaderships, they are number one in Europe, but also in the country. But the problem is we cannot have equality without equity.
Okay.
So in the future, if we will succeed the equality between women and men, what will do with the future generation? Because the women have some advantage and difference than men. It's okay to have a voice and work and have a leadership, but also maybe work less or bring communities to this psychological or holistic approach to the woman, because it has different needs than a man.
Right.
And it's more to the action, and also it's more strategic, and the brain is constructed differently. But we have this problem in Romania, even if we are the number one in leaderships who take care of the children.
It's a question?
Yeah, equity.
Right. So I see your framing of saying we should probably look at some social norms. Who would you like to direct your
At
question?
Bandana.
At Bandana. Okay, great.
So second question.
Yes, we're going to take 3 questions. So we'll just grab the second question.
Hi, my name is Amina, and I come from Pakistan, a country that is quite conservative, and women don't have it easy there. So I'm gonna, my main comment is that for any program to be successful, if you're targeting women, you take the men along. I'll give you 2 examples. In Pakistan, to incentivize the women and to digitally include them, there was a scheme where there was a small project where they started handing out cell phones to women, asking them to come and register themselves and then using the cell phones for e-learning. Now that backfired massively because the men they feared that this will not bode well with the culture of the female having the freedom to, dial in or look at whatever content they want to. But on the other hand, the government had a very successful program with similar outcomes. So the Benazir Income Support Program, which is named after our first female Prime Minister, it's a cash transfer social protection program. And within that, the government basically hands out 9,000 rupees, which is about $30 per quarter, to the poorest of the poor women. So it's targeted to the women, and you are supposed to register with your national ID card, and then you get disbursements through your ATM or your mobile or your bank accounts. So this program was massively successful. It registered about 6 million women who get regular transfers even today. And the outcomes that we've seen today is that men bring their women to register. Now moving forward, they're also willing to register for e-wallets. So mobile phones women will start registering because we are connecting these two together. So just the different approach can work in your favor, given the local context. So whatever policy it is, it has to be homegrown, it has to be local. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that commentary. Thank you.
Okay, it sort of builds a bit on what Anna Maria was saying, and my question is more: how do we build for the future that we want, taking cognizance of the reality that we have today? So, and what I mean by that is, I've noticed that a lot of the interventions to effectively help women, particularly in rural areas, focuses on access to water, childcare. And even things like putting into legislation, and South Africa is an example of this as well, is increasing access to maternity leave, which is great. And it also consolidates the role of women as being the child carer, which, as we've seen in Anna Maria's example, is a huge challenge for women in leadership. So how do we do that? Because effectively, childcare is not a mother thing. Childcare is a parent thing. And yet, culturally, that's an anathema in many parts of the world. How do we grapple that?
Thank you. I think we'll take a third question. So who it's a broad question.
It's a broad question, but okay. I suppose specifically to Bandana and Christelle, because that's some of the issues. And And Sue as well. I mean, look, it's for the whole panel. Apologies, it's kind of thrown out there.
Thank you. Okay, that's great. Thank you. We'll take a third question because the second one was a comment, and then we'll hand over to the panel. Please go ahead.
My name is Mbaranga Gasarabwe. I'm from Rwanda. Mine is a comment, but anybody here can respond to that. I think it's the empowerment and the word of equity. And we add gender empowerment, gender equity. And I'm glad I see here the professor of the School of Policy. And I want to come really back on this policy issue. How do we make sure that the policy address the public and the private and those words of empowering and the equity? Because I see here that we're still talking about the grassroots issues, which is very good. But still, we have to raise the boundary and beyond and talk about the national, regional, and the leadership. And the leadership, I think, when women take over, and we have done studies when it showed that COVID, we finished a study done by a group of global women leaders. We're 66 occupying high position in UN and in the public and private sector. And we found out from that study that when you have really a chance to give a woman matter of leadership on high position, take the over policy, you rise from the boundary, the boundary from the grassroots, from those projects you're talking about, this equity, the child care you're talking about. Each project has to have that as dimension. You talk about sanitation. This child who's 12 years, 13 years, 14 years, who has her period and cannot go to school because she doesn't have funds, and she has to go to have someone giving some money and get pregnant and leave the school. Those are the issues we are talking about. Right. And when we address this leadership matter, so I really want anybody here to comment on that and how we really like that policy issue on leadership, empowerment, and equity. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great. I'm going to hand over to Bandana first to address the question on social norms in childcare, and then also hand the mic to Christelle afterwards.
Thank you so much for raising that uncomfortable question. That's the elephant in the room that nobody talks about when we're talking about empowerment. Yeah, and the Nobel Prize winner of economics this year is a woman. And her statement is so pragmatic. She says the downfall of a working woman begins with the first child, when the first child is born. She says that, and she's a labor expert. So yes, there is a statistics which speaks about the fact that women give up jobs for childcare. So, and they're encouraged, and they're made to make this do this sacrifice for the betterment of the family. And the person she is takes the background. So what do we do now? This is a reality. So what do we do? The option is we have to first, as she said, it's a parent issue. It's not a woman issue. It's a parenting issue. So number one. Number two, that we have to create an ecosystem around it. And as I said, we have to have that childcare facility, and we have to have that ecosystem, that safe travel, if you're working at nights. If there are children, there has to be flexi working hours, work from home. These are the things that we have got used to during COVID, and you have to give that flexibility to women. Because if we don't do that, what is the opportunity cost that we are talking about? We know, because just as I tell my husband, you have a wife at home taking care of everything, and I don't have a wife. I mean, so the thing is, yes, so we burn out, but if we don't work, if we don't contribute, the economy suffers, the family suffers, the children who look at us as role models, they will not look at, so the next generation suffers. So yes, it's a difficult, but we have to create an ecosystem and a government could come in there, and I think we women need to do a little less of multitasking and take help. I think we should take help, professional help, family support, and also let's not give up on our dreams, because we have to take care of children.
Thanks so much. We're running really close on time, so I'm going to just give an opportunity to take a few more questions, and then if you want to add to that, Christelle. So 1, 2, I think we really only have time for these two. The gentleman here in my sister here. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I think the person from Pakistan touched a bit on what I was going to say. I'm from Nigeria. My name is Saudi, and I also work in the social protection sector. And for those of us that come from conservative societies, even for those of us that are professional, working mothers, family people, it's tough. And it's still taking time for us to be able to be heard in the room. Mm-hmm. And it's much worse for those in rural areas. We've talked about cash transfers. The experience in Nigeria has been that we give those transfers and they hand it over to their husbands.
Right.
Many times they take the cards, the men take charge of all the interventions that we do. You provide funds for them, you provide capital, and the men just find a way of getting all the money out because traditionally they do not want the women in these positions. Right. And as I reflect on it, I think, just like someone else mentioned, we need the men on our side. We can't do it without the men. And case in point, looking at myself and the many other women that have gotten opportunities to do good work, it's thanks to the men that we've worked with, in my case, mm-hmm. because they've put us forward. They've been able to allow us show what we can offer. And I think this can also be applicable in the rural areas as well, because we have the legislation, we have the policies, but it's still not working if we don't engage with the communities, if we don't engage with the local leaders to make them understand. And I think that's the major problem that we have. How do we get the men to change that mindset that they have about women not participating, women not leading, women not doing anything? Thank you.
Thank you for that intervention. Time's up, but I'm going to grab the question quickly from my brother over there.
Thank you. Thank you. My question is to Christelle. And we're witnessing that humanitarian emergencies, mainly driven by conflict and climate-related shocks, are becoming more frequent and more severe. And the impact is disproportionate as it comes to women who are most vulnerable or affected by such emergencies. And non-governmental organizations have been adapting their models of responses in such areas. So, for example, in the early 90s and 2000s, there was a transition from providing commodities to cash, which has been mentioned. But my question is, if NGOs are always reacting, they'll always stay behind the curve. What does a future humanitarian intervention system that's responsive to the gendered impact of conflict and climate change look like? And how can NGOs anticipate and prepare to be able to deliver these responses? Because I think the more they always react to the circumstance, like the bigger the gap grows. And it's really on the margins of women affected, especially by humanitarian emergencies, where a lot of the gains that we're mentioning will be lost.
Right. Do you want to direct that question to someone in particular, or it's open for the panel?
It was to Krista.
Christelle, please go ahead, Krista.
Yes, thank you so much, all the audience, for their interesting questions. Because in the interest of time, I think I'll just address the one that was asked about childcare. So yes, those social protection programs, because I didn't have much time, I couldn't really explain. But it's not only cash; they are really accompanied by a set of measures that really try to leverage the impact of cash. And among those, we have what we call the social and behavioral change communication. A lot has to do about positive parenting. In the beginning, we were trying to say, to see a couple of model mothers, and we call them light mothers, maman lumière in French. Now it has become parent lumière, because we found that as the intervenant from Pakistan mentioned, it doesn't work if you don't bring men along. So in the beginning, you had an increase on violence. We had even an increase on child dropout, because some of the men were just taking the money, beating the wife, taking the money to go and marry the second wife or something like this. Now we realize that we have to tweak the program and to accompany it by really some kind of education in terms of how to use money best, in terms of how to show them outcomes in children, how to feed children better, because feeding kids is not only about money, it's also about some kind of practices. And then bringing men along. Last time I went to a visit in the field, I was very proud. I was very proud to see a father, Dad Lumiere. He had become a hero in the village, because his children are best, now they are best fed. Their malnutrition rate is much higher. And then that could really encourage other men also to come along and then to become men that really are involved in raising their children, in feeding them. And this is the kind of positive change that you want to see. Like you say, it's an issue of parents, it's not only mothers. So now we are calling them model parents, not only model mothers. And it's making a difference in the community. So in terms of, so really it's also addressing your comment at the same time. In terms of the NGOs, how can they really be leveraged and be harnessed to, along with those movements? Again, Madagascar is a very good example because it's one of the countries most affected by climate change. Southern of Madagascar is really prone to cyclones, but also to the drought. And then there, government program that was done by government and donors only did not really work. And then now I'm really designing a program that will be funded by the European Union, and I just did a mapping of the NGOs because local community, they have their knowledge, but they don't really have the framework to work if you don't harness the NGOs experience that has been there working for many years. So the NGOs is actually, they come along with us because they have the knowledge of the region, because they have the experience. It's really networks of many, elsewhere in the world, but that really can help to adapt this local reality to address a global challenge. I think this is really the NGO value added, is really that they can help you to contextualize the solutions. And also because they are really the one in the field. They are the one in the field. Like you say, you can really have these global problems, but if you don't contextualize the solution, it won't work. It's not copy and paste, it's not one size fits all. And NGOs are really, really good at that because they've been there longer than us, because also they are the one really working at the grassroots level. But at the same time, they are connected enough to really be able to make this link. For me, this is the best value added of the NGOs in terms of helping us address those issues. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Christelle. We've come to time. I think there's a lot more that we could have said. I know. I think, this is the Cape Town conversation. Let's continue the conversation. It doesn't end here. I think Ornella wants to respond to the query from our brother there. So I think you should definitely connect with each other on that one. I want to, again, just a big thank you to this panel. I think you've been really fantastic. Really appreciate your interventions. Thank you to the audience for participating, for taking the time to listen, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon here in Cape Town.